For those of you who saw this presentation in, I think it was June, I've lost track of time. I did this by myself, so, you know, things off the cuff stuff that I spoke about will be different today because today I'm doing this with my sister. So there will be other things that will be mentioned that I didn't think of, but she's a historian, she knows stuff, you know, so she'll be bringing another element into this presentation. Let's hope. Just hold it. So, I just would like to start off with my mother wrote this book, her mother wrote this book in her late 80s. It was published when she was 90 years old in 2006. And this picture that you see on the cover of the book, this picture was used by the Jewish Partisans Educational Foundation as their poster child by putting a Che Guevara cap on her and making her their poster child for that. And we'll speak a little more about that organization a little later on. What I want to say is, in this book, my mother tells her story. We are not going to tell her story because it's her story. It's not us. If you want to know her story, and we'll reference it, this book is available over there. The charge is $20, and the money is going to Hope just try to help out with the cost of this exhibition.
Thank you so much.
The other work she's done. So feel free to do that. Okay.
And they'll autograph it for you. You have two people here.
Whatever that means to you. My mother wanted very, very much her one of the most important things to her. She is the only survivor, or was, she's gone now, was the only survivor of a family of 12.
Wow.
No one else in her family, there are no graves, there's no place to go to connect with her family. It was very important to her to keep their faces and their names alive for herself and to give her family to us. When my mother died and we made her headstone, you can see it says devoted wife, mother, grandmother, heroine of war and peace, and her dates. The rest of the headstone is dedicated to her family because they have no headstones, they have no graves. So, and Pincus and Shain were her parents. And my mother did write down the names and descriptions of her siblings, which we are going to share with you.
Can I just make one remark? When my mother was asked if she ever had a desire to go back to Poland for any reason to visit, her answer was always the same. She said, if I had even one grave to visit, I would have been there multiple times. But she never went back because she didn't have a grave to visit.
So you're going to hear a description of her 9 brothers. I just want to stick one. If you were here, and I know most of you were not here for the previous presentation, which was about the survivor of Hiroshima. And it was a 20-minute film. It was amazing. And what it did was focus on one person, which makes it's not just this big thing that happened to a gazillion people. It's not 6 million Jews that were murdered. There was a family of 12. It brings it down to like the single person that was highlighted in the Hiroshima movie. This is about individuals. So, we will start with,
Okay. Shulam. My older brother did not survive because of me. He was in a group of people who were going to escape to Russia. When he came home to say goodbye, I took the rucksack off his back and said, "You cannot go where we will not know where you are." The others left. He stayed, and I lived with that guilt all my life. Shulam and I, we were always the big kids. We did everything together. We took care of the little ones and took the bigger ones to school. We went to Hebrew lessons in the evenings. I helped him with the Torah reading before his bar mitzvah. I was a fast learner. We were very active in sports. I was quite a good soccer player. At 15, Shulam was the most popular boy in school. He was tall and handsome and a good dancer and singer. Everybody loved him. He helped everyone. He included everyone. At a dance party, all the girls danced when my brother was there. He was very strong as he grew older. Every Friday evening, all the young people would go walking on the main street. Some of the Polish hooligans also came out pushing around in the crowd until they saw my brother and friends coming. They ran for their lives. When the ghetto was burning and I and my father were leaving, I saw my brother on the other side. The houses were burning, the Germans were shooting, and we could not come together. That was when I saw my brother Shulam for the last time.
Mara. We heard the story of Mara growing up our entire lives. So I always knew if I had a daughter, she would be named Mara. When I had a daughter and I named her Mara, my father freaked out because you can't name after somebody who died so young. It's bad luck. And my answer to him was, nobody died old. Everybody died young. Mara. Mara was a very beautiful girl. She had a very light complexion and long golden blonde hair. She mostly kept to herself, not too many friends and no boyfriends. After public school, she had enough of education and wanted to be in the family business. Father accepted her and she did a great job taking care of all 3 stores and the workers. She was 14 years old then. Before the ghetto was fenced in, many people came to look up. When she was 19 years old, Mara met a young man from one of the families that came in, and they fell in love, and they were married. When the first action in our town took place, Mara was 8 months pregnant. The Germans rounded up all the Jews, and we were sitting on the ground in the marketplace. May 2nd, 1942. Mara stood up to look for her husband, and that's when one German noticed her. He came over and kept hitting her with the butt of his machine gun in the belly until he killed her. I held my mother tight that she would not see, but I did. That horror still lives with me. Mara, my next in line sister.
Friday. My third in line sister was altogether different. Shy, quiet, and very good-natured. Another mother in the family. She cared about everyone, worked very hard in the house and in the business, which was a bakery. She loved to read. She helped the younger ones with homework and at play. She belonged to a religious Zionist organization where she attended meetings regularly. Her friends were mostly like her. They met only Friday nights and on Saturday afternoons. All of us adored Frida, and my mother depended a lot on her. She kept our clothes in order and our shoes shining. I was her biggest problem. I ran around a lot. In the marketplace, all together to be deported, she took off her sweater and put it over my head. She said, "You will need it. You will be called out to work. I have to go with Mommy. She is going to need me." So much for a person who was the best of the people in the world, my sister.
Yaakov Moshe. I remember my brother Misha only from the time when he was about 10 years old. His reputation, a walking encyclopedia. He knew all the answers. A good boy, active in sports and games. He had many friends and he always helped them with their homework. He was respectful to the older people whom he used to help all the time. Ever since I remember him, he was always helping the business. In Lukov, he was one of the 4 who remained in the ghetto after the first action. When the ghetto was liquidated, he was taken to Treblinka. In later years, I met some people who told me that a group of 5 organized an escape from Treblinka. 2 of them came through and 3 died on the electric fence. One of them was my brother Moshe, one of my brothers.
Feiga. Feiga was one of the 4 that remained in the ghetto. She was 12 years old, tall and beautiful. She looked 16. The ghetto police did not leave her alone. She did not go out much, and if she did, never alone. Young girls used to disappear for days. It was a dangerous place. She was a good girl, easy to be with. At the liquidation of the ghetto, which started at 5 o'clock in the morning, between the fire and the shooting, everybody running, Feiga disappeared and we never saw her again. Now, that is as much as is known about my 4th-in-line sister.
Hannah. Hannah was a small girl, pretty and always happy. She was always talking and demanded a lot of attention. Shulam and I often took her with us when we went out to meet our friends. Many times she was entertaining the group, dancing and singing. Her voice was outstanding. At the marketplace, she tried desperately to run away, but was always brought back again. How did she know that the place she was going to was so bad? My 4th sister. She would have been 62 years old now. This was written, years ago.
Joshua Wolf. I only remember him as a kid, clumsy, always trying to stay out of everybody's way. Mother used to give him a lot of attention. He was never sure if he was doing the right thing. My oldest brother used to take him along many times, even when he was out on a date. During the war, he was hiding most of the time. He was scared. During the action, he was sitting near my mother. I don't think he realized what was going on. He was taken to Treblinka with the rest of the family. My poor, innocent little child's brother.
Meyer Yehuda. My little brother, 4th in line. What did they do to him in Treblinka? How did he die? He was so afraid to go outside. How much can I remember about him? I remember one time when he went out and did not come home until dark. We were desperate, but could not go out to look for him. There was danger on the street. He came back late at night scared. He couldn't even cry. There were Germans on the street and people running. The little boy was hiding in a doorway for many hours, and when it got dark, he came home. He never went out again.
Azriel Noah, the baby. Everyone took care of the baby. Big brother carried him on his shoulder when going out with friends. I remember little Nochada, small, round face, big dark eyes, a good baby. Now I am not naive, I am not stupid, and I am still asking, why?
When my dad died, and we filled in his side of the headstone, he had, there were 11 children in his family, but many of them, 5 survived, and the others died as they were growing up, different reasons. But there was one sister who was murdered by the Germans, and actually she was murdered by the Poles, I think. What was it? And that's on my dad's headstone. You want to explain what happened? Because that's kind of interesting. As the historian.
When, after the first bombings and killings, the Soviets actually sent vans and trucks and trains into eastern Poland to actually evacuate some Jews. So to suggest that people didn't know what was going to happen by 1939-40 is nonsense, because the Soviets had information that there would be the annihilation of Jews. And they were taking Jews into the Soviet Union. My father, who was about 21 at the time, and an older brother and a younger brother, ended up going into the Soviet Union. My father ended up on a communal farm, and then he was drafted into the army in 1941 when the Nazis invaded. The older brother was a master welder. He ended up out in Siberia, which was a good thing, very comfortable with his wife and child, because he was a master welder, and out in Siberia he was helping to build the munitions for the war. The younger brother was 15 years old. He ended up in a kind of boarding school orphanage of sorts, a high school orphanage, right? And so they ended up there. A sister came later who ended up in as a nurse in the Soviet army.
The town of Lukov, that both our parents lived in. Now, my mother was 2 years older than my father, so she really didn't know about him, because why would she? You know, he's 2 years younger. But he knew her very, very well, because she was very well known in the town, and you'll hear more about that. But they did not, know each other really as they were growing up, though their families did. Her older brother, Shulam, was very good friends with my father's older brother, Yidel. So, the families were connected, but not our mother and father. So I'm just gonna give you a little history about Lukov itself. You can read along with me. The Jewish community in Lukov numbered about 6,000, or about 50% of the population. Almost all of them were murdered in the Holocaust. On September 4th, 1939, the German Luftwaffe bombed Lukov's train station, causing many civilian deaths. Our paternal grandmother, Rivka, it's my middle name, Rivka was selling food at the train station when it was bombed. She was among the first deaths in Germany's war. In May 1941, a large Jewish ghetto was formed, and Jews were brought in from other towns, and that's how Mara met her husband. And the number of Jews in the ghetto was nearly 12,000. In mid-September 1942, it was fenced in. Approximately 2,200 inmates were shot locally into execution pits. Our paternal grandfather, Herschel, my brother's first name, was among them. Others were sent to Treblinka extermination camp. In October 1942, deportations took place on the 5th and 8th, and in November on the 7th and 8th. Around 9,000 Jews were put onto trains and sent to Treblinka, where they were murdered. On May 2nd, 1943, the remaining 3,000 to 4,000 Jews were transported to Treblinka. Our maternal grandmother, Shain, my first name, and her 6 youngest children were among them. Only about 150 Jews of Lukov survived the Holocaust, mostly in the USSR, and our father was among them. Lukov was an important center of anti-German resistance. Our mother was part of that resistance.
Right.
My father's family, okay, Rivka and Herschel. You can see the picture with the 3 people. That's Herschel, our paternal grandfather. The middle person is our dad as a teenager, and the one next to him is his older sister, Luba, who became the nurse in Russia. They give a little insight into the tenant farmer thing here.
Okay, the family actually for a couple of generations had been tenant farmers on, believe it or not, a noblewoman's land. It was still almost a semi-feudalistic kind of system. And the noblewoman's husband had been killed when the Bolsheviks basically invaded Poland in the 1920s to try to take over, but they were pushed back by a very important military leader, Marshal Pilsudski, right, who became a national hero. She had tenant farmers. The land was returned to her after the Bolsheviks were defeated, and she continued her relationship with the tenant farmers that were there. An interesting story, a bunch of capitalists, as they called them in Poland, came to talk to her and said, "Sell us your farm." She said, I can't sell you my farm, I have tenants. And they said, "Never mind, what are they paying you?" She told them what they were paying, and he says, "We'll give you 100 times that." And it was interesting because the nature of the feudalistic system was that there was mutual obligation. And she said, "I can throw the Vrobels off the land. They've been here for 3 generations." It's interesting that as a feudal system, she felt that she had an obligation to her tenants, every bit as much as her tenants had an obligation to her. So it's just a...
And this noblewoman was a Christian woman. So my father's family grew up in a Christian area. His younger sister, Sarah, didn't even speak Yiddish. She spoke Polish, and she had no idea she was really Jewish for quite a while. So, and this was more a peasant class, therefore my father's superstition about the name I chose for my daughter, there was more of that level of whatever. And we move on to our mother's family. As you can see, that's Shain with a little bit of shoulder. They were a much more liberal, more progressive, more modern family. They lived in the town. Our grandfather, Pinchas, was always proud of the fact that when all 10 children went to school, they all had new shoes every year. New shoes for the children, 10 children, you know. So I give a little insight into the cultural side of the family.
Oh, you mean the kinds of things?
Yes.
Okay. Shain was always in the annual plays, Purim plays. She was always Queen Esther because she was regarded as the most beautiful woman in town, right? But also just a little bit of a side story. Pinchas was involved in everything, and not just Jewish communal organizations. He was on the town council, he was on the school boards. In other words, they were highly respected by their Catholic neighbors as well. He used to also bring, let's say, performances into town. People who could afford these performances would pay so that the poor people could come for free. And one of those things that he'd bring annually to look of would be the Yiddish theater that was led by the great actress Ida Kaminska, right? And Ida Kaminska, so when the troupe came to town, they would basically be housed in various people's homes. And because Pinchas was in charge of this, the lead stars would sleep at their houses. So Ida Kaminska and a couple of other of the important players in the Yiddish theater would stay at their houses, eat at their table. Whenever I see the film Shop on Main Street, right, a Czech film from 1965, and I sit there and I look at Ida Kaminska, there's a scene, I love the film, I think it's the greatest Holocaust film ever made, right? But I have to walk out of the room at some point when she's listening to a Yiddish song on the megaphone, on the gramophone. Because I sit there and I look at her and I say, she ate at my grandmother's table. She hugged my grandmother and my grandfather. And we never did. And it's this connection to Ida Kaminska, but it's also this moment that I literally have to walk out of the room to cry because she got to do something we never got to do.
Wow.
These pictures that we have of the family, of course, my mother didn't have pictures, you know. We were able to get them from my mother and Anna, when Anna was 14 years old, took a trip to London. where Shain's older sister had emigrated to England in 1912, and they would share pictures. So when my mother you were 14, what year was that? 64, 1964. That was the first time my mother was able to see pictures of her family that she got from her aunt. So in this picture with the whole family, what?
It's not
Not the whole family. Here she is, Shain was pregnant with the 8th child, and then there were going to be a total of 10. And Mara is the first one on top on the left, and Etta, our mother, is right next to her, and Shulam, her older brother, she must have been standing or something, so. And
But also, it's the first time we ever saw what anybody looked like.
yeah. And talk about Lutch for a sec. Okay.
These photographs were actually taken in Lodz, Poland, rather than in Lukov. During the Depression, the bakeries kind of went under for a period of time, and Pinchas's older brother, had moved to Lodz and had still a rather thriving produce store. So he invited the family to come to Lodz and live with them, and he could provide them with work in the produce store. So basically, the picture that you see of Etta sitting on that fence, on that partition, these are the people who were her friends and co-workers at that produce store in Lodz. And the picture of my mother and Shulam, I speculate strongly that this picture was taken in Lodz because of their age, because of how old they were. They spent a few years there, and they did not go back to Lukov until after the Nazis invaded. Their mother believing, you never knew what was the right thing to do, believing ultimately wrongly that it would be better to be in a town where they were familiar rather than in a big city like Lodz. But Lodz survived the war a lot longer than other cities because it was an industrial center and the Nazis used Jewish slave labor. So Jews actually survived longer in Lodz. Eventually it was eliminated as well. But you had a much longer survival rate in Lodz than in a lot of other cities. And it's impossible, I think, for my mother and Shulam to look this happy in Lukov after the Nazis were there.
Our mother was the one who would tell us these stories since, as small children, she spoke to us. She gave us her life, and it was, there were two parts with a real divider in the middle. There was Far de Milchuma and Durch de Milchuma. Far de Milchuma was before the war. Durch de Milchuma was after the war. So she would tell us about her life before and her life after, and there was this absolute dividing line between the two. But within that dividing line, that's where we heard the story of Mara and how she died and how she was brutally beaten to death, 8 months pregnant. Just as a quickie aside, her name was Mariam Sarah, and she was known as Mara. When I was pregnant with my third child and I wanted a name, because my sense was that when Mara died in her 8th month, there was a viable baby there. So I used her second name for my third child, and that's Sarah. So anyway, when my dad's kind of took a back seat, we didn't hear a lot about what happened to him during the war, because there were many reasons, but my mother was center stage with that. When my mother was gone, when she died, my father actually told me about his experience in the war. I took notes, and this is what he told me. I was 23 years old and working on a farm in Russia in 1941 when Germany declared war on Russia. A few weeks later, I received my draft notice. I received my uniform, was assigned to a special unit, and was sent to the First White Russian Front. For 3.5 years, we moved slowly forward and finally crossed the Polish border in 1944, and we pushed the enemy to Warsaw. I was given a 10-day leave and went to Lukov to find family, but nobody was left in the town. The Russians had moved the partisans 30 kilometers away while they removed mines. Only 3 women were in the group. One of them was Hayetka Hyatt, which was my mother's full name, whose name I recognized. Near Garwolin, 25 meters from Warsaw, I was hit with shrapnel and received a severe head wound. After 21 days in a coma, I regained consciousness. In July 1944, I was given a 6-month leave, but was told that I must remain in uniform. I was driven by truck to Lukov and took back my home. In Lukov, I came across 20 survivors who were living together in one building to protect themselves from Polish fascists. One of these was a partisan who had come out of the woods, a woman who carried a sawed-off rifle under her coat. Her name was Etta Haidt. She was installed as mayor and worked in the town's main office. Though we grew up in the same town and I knew who she was, she didn't know me. I came to the office every day and watched her as she worked, and I fell in love. Weeks went by before she agreed to let me be the one who walked her home. She didn't want to get involved with a soldier, but even though I was still in uniform by the end of 44, she finally agreed to marry me.
Can I just want to make a note. Shain was talking about before the Milchoma, after the Milchoma. When my parents were talking about World War II in general, my father would use the term Weltkrieg, World War. When they used the term Milchoma, it was strictly the war against the Jews. There was a distinction between those two.
What was the first word?
Weltkrieg, World War, literally World War.
When you want to talk about this, don't you? Where they went from.
Okay. Even the escape stories, even post-war, are complicated, very, very long and complicated stories. So we'll do it real quick. That my father at some point took off his Russian uniform. Let me just say that one of the reasons that they had to leave, at some point he said to her, "You've got to leave Lukov," because there had been a plot. An old Polish man came to my father and said, "I have overheard that your wife is going to be, that your girlfriend, your wife is going to be assassinated tonight."
Right. She
Right.
was placed as mayor of the town by the Russians.
And she didn't necessarily want to do it, but you had to do what you had to do. So she was in theory being led to, called to a meeting, an official meeting, but that's not really what was going on. They're going to take her out to the woods and they're basically going to put a bullet in her head, right, and get rid of her. This old Polish man told my father about this, and that's the day he went into the office and said, "We're out of here today." And that's how they started to move along. They ended up in Breslau, what is now Wrocław, right? And that's where they stayed actually for a few months. That's very likely where they got married. That's likely where Hal was born, right? And then at some point, my father, who was always, he should have really been in the CIA or the Mossad, because he got intelligence that the Soviets were getting closer to close the borders between the East and the West. He really didn't want to stay in the East and wanted to keep moving west. Very, very arduous journey, over hill, over dale, with a relatively sick wife still, and because of the trauma of the war, and a starving new baby that was born in Breslau. And they finally made it to the American zone of occupied West Germany, which is where they ended up in a displaced persons camp. And a new camp was being opened up, and actually the person who was there for the day that the camp opened was General Dwight Eisenhower. And he asked if there was anybody in the group that had any military experience whatsoever. My father raised his hand, and Eisenhower himself put him in charge of a whole sector of the new camp. And running that camp, because there was a lot of cooperation between the British zone and the American zone, was a woman, British general, Jewish, who had lost her whole family back in England in the bombings, in the Blitzkrieg. So she devoted her life at that time to taking care of displaced persons and refugees.
As they were taking themselves from the east to the west, he was born Herschel, but he was then Harold when we came to America, because you couldn't be Herschel, right? And then when he was 17, he became Hal. He was born along their trek, and he almost died from malnutrition. My mother had no food, there was no milk, so you can see a little skinny guy over there on the left. The picture all the way on the right, they're at the DP camp, and Hal has filled out quite a bit, and she's pregnant with me. Make a note.
To save his life, because he was really starving to death, he couldn't take in any nutrition whatsoever, and my mother didn't have very much to give him at the time. There was word that there was a doctor who had his license taken away by the Americans because he'd been a Nazi. But the word was, this man may be able to save this child's life, and my mother said, but he's a Nazi, and my mother said, I'll take him to Hitler himself if he can save his life, and he did save his life.
At the DP camp, there's a lot of information here which I'm not going to go into, but you look at the picture, my mother holding Hal, Herschel, and me, her little chub thing. I think I had plenty of food. And that smile, and that's the thing that gets to me, that smile on her face, that she not only survived, but had children she never thought she was going to have. Right, she didn't have it. I mean, I don't go into that. And then they came, that's my birth certificate over on the right there, a German birth certificate. They came to America. Compared to the DP camp, America was a hellhole for what they came into.
What year?
They came in 1947.
August.
Okay. And we're going to use, no, we can. Yes.
What was the
Yes.
life like in the United States? You said the life in America compared to the DP camp was hell. So
When-
what was it like?
Well, you're going to find out.
I don't know this right.
Is this the time to talk about the trip?
No, yes, yes, why not? Okay, so, let's go ahead and use that.
Want to introduce?
I just want to point out, you know, I talked about my mother's story, her own story. You see that picture on the right, that long braid? That braid saved her life. And that story's in the book. So they came to America, and this is a poem that Anna had written about their trip over
On the USS Ernie Park.
on the Ernie Pyle.
I'm going to read an excerpt. At some point, my mother gave me a wooden bowl that she brought over on the trip, and also an enamel basin. I'm only going to read one excerpt from this longer poem, right?
It's called the Wooden Bowl.
But this is an excerpt. There's the enamel basin for washing babies on the boat when he was seasick in his bed and she alert to brimming. A Negro porter was good to her, helped wash the diapers and hung the line across for drying. He, her first American friend, on that joyless, essential journey, from mounds of death and ash to who knew what, to who cares anyway, it'd have to be better, yes? I got the basin along the way, no longer bathing salvaged siblings. It sits in a garden with soil and snow to be filled with flowers to color the shortness of Maine's summer. Someday it will be earth, I can see that now. But the wooden bowl my mother once used to chop onions and liver, that may have also crossed the sea, remains a blessed mystery to me, and still in all, a mighty fine tool.
When we arrived, many organizations in New York helped support the family. My father got a loan to open a business. You can see, Harris Robel, my brother, and Shain Robel, we got alien registration cards because we were aliens. Then in 1950, here she is. When Anna was born, we were positive that she would be the first Jewish female president of the United States. It didn't quite work out that way.
I heard about 1 million times that I was the American in the family and the only one who could be president, but that I was the American in the family. And though I tried to avoid it in 3,000 different ways, I ended up, my destiny was to become an American historian.
Way to go.
And just the reason I put this in, if you look at the middle picture, the way my brother is looking at my mother, I just love this picture. He adored her so. I just love the picture, so I have to share it.
Where's
Brownsville. Yes.
where is the kids room?
When we got a little older, we would go into, wherever they took us, for a weekend, for whatever. My father would come up by bus from the grocery store, because that's what we had. So my parents became citizens in 1953. And then based on their citizenship, my brother and I were able to become citizens in 1959. You had to be 12 years old before you could do it, and it had to be related to your parents who had already been for X number of years. So my brother and I did it at the same time. So it came up last in June when we did this, came up about the effect that being a survivor family, what effect does it have on the children? Well, we're gonna kind of address that. This picture, the idea was we were gonna be a normal American family. And how do you become a normal? You watch Father Knows Best, you watch the Donna Reed show, and you figure out how to be a normal American family so that you project that. But then you go back into your home and you close the door and it is anything normal. So, am I reading this way? Okay, let's read this way.
Unless you want.
No, that's fine. Anna wrote this poem. All the poems we're reading today, Anna wrote. Parents and children, they were different from the parents of other children. Blamed, shamed, demonized, labeled, horrified, segregated, ghettoized, enslaved, witness to great murder.
Oh my.
They were just different from the parents of other children. We were different than the children of other parents. No grandmothers, no heirlooms, walls thick with rage and swallowed pain, the air fogged with grief, the lost unknowable, the found in our hands and eyes, perhaps a trait passed on. Ancestors aplenty, the Nazis saw to that. Young aunts, life uncles, little cousins, not a one to die for being old. We lived in the house of murdered people for him, some of them. For her, all of them. We bore the names of murdered people, and into a fourth generation with insufficient babies to recall them all to life. We were looked mentioned much of the time without ground, without lineage, without a shtetl and a shul. We were dwellings to many people, have breathed for many lives,
and still don't know where they end and we begin. We were just different than the children of other parents.
My dad put together, I believe, put together a few $1,000, joined up with some other, they have a grocery store where my parents worked together, put together enough funds to join with others to buy a piece of land in Staten Island and build homes. And he became a builder in Staten Island. As a matter of fact, he was highlighted in the Staten Island Museum at one point because he was so highly regarded when Staten Island was being totally messed up with a lot of them. Once he became successful at that, my mother could get out of the store, which left her free to be who she needed to be. She became one of, yes, she moved into fundraising roles for many, many organizations. She not only rubbed elbows, but broke bread with so many people that, you'll recognize here. Elie Wiesel, Yitzhak Rabin, Leah Rabin, Cy Sims, So, one of the jobs I was given, because Anna lived far away, so I was given the job of being somebody who introduced her, somebody who introduced, other dignitaries, because I was given those jobs, go do this. I was also asked, when my mother was being honored by Israel Bonds, I was asked to give a toast to my mother. The time I was 40 years old, I remember it well. Growing up, again, you can see our mother was like a woman of steel. She was, the Irish maiden. But we knew as her children that there was a fragility there that she could never really allow to be touched. I've said this, one of the only times we ever saw her cry, or maybe the only time we ever saw her cry, was when Martin Luther King was assassinated. That's when she broke down.
He had a crush on him. Can I just say, she used to tell me about Martin Luther King Jr. She used to say, that is what my father meant by a mensch. So that became my concept of, let's say, that's what my grandfather thought was a mensch. Okay, that became my concept as well, and it was hers.
So when I was 40, I remember this well, up to that point, we always protected our mother. I mean, we would have things, that kind of thing. But we knew that on some level there was a fragility. When I was 40, my mother and I had the biggest fight ever. And it came to a point where it was so bad that we took a break from each other. But I still was lined up to do a toast for her at Israel Bonds. And I showed up, she showed up, a lot of people she had no idea what I was gonna say. And I think she was scared. We always had a difficult relationship. So this was my toast. Today is a very special day. Today is a very special day for our guest of honor, my mother, Etta Robel. Many of you here today are aware of her involvement in many worthwhile causes. She has demonstrated time and time again her boundless energy, her generosity, her intellect, and her uncanny ability to inspire others, not only on behalf of Israel Bonds, but many other organizations and institutions that benefit the Jewish state and the Jewish people.
knowing I was to speak here today presented me with somewhat of a dilemma. I could see her shaking. How does one choose from a whole lifetime an outstanding characteristic or highlight? How does one separate the lady from the mommy? In thinking about the conversation with my brother and my sister about our mother, there are main themes that emerge over and over that impressed us as children and continue to do so now. Those outstanding characteristics are her great personal strength and a very basic sense of humanitarianism. Her strength was a strength that enabled her, together with my father, to rebuild a shattered life. It has never ceased to amaze me that while dealing with her own indescribable pain, she was able to not only give life and love and care, but to do it with an incredible zest. And her humanitarianism is evident in the respect shown her today. She is to her children a model we can only hope to emulate. I looked at my mom and I just said, Mommy, I love you. Oh, please rise to join me in a toast to my mom, Etta Robel.
Wow.
This picture shows, I don't know if you know about Akeem. Akeem is an organization in Israel that takes care of mentally handicapped children and adults and offers respite for the caretakers, and it's a very, very large organization. And they came to America and were told to speak to Etta Robel about fundraising and setting up Friends of Akeem in America, which my mother, actually, when they came to my mother, my father had said to her many years, she was involved in Hadassah, Bonds, Yibo, many, many organizations, and my father said to her, no more, because he was driving her everywhere. But they came from Akeem to ask her to do this nationally, to go different cities and set up chapters. She said, I can't, my husband won't let me. My father goes, for the children? Of course you have to do it. So that's...
And I also, she went, while in Israel on one of her 3,000 visits, they asked her, would you please come to one of our homes for adults that are challenged? And she went, and she ended up just spending the whole day there, eating with them, talking with people, dancing with them. And while the household had 12 people in the immediate family, there really were 15 people in the household. Because there was also somebody who was intellectually challenged, whose parents had gone to the United States, emigrated at some point, and he couldn't get a visa, he was left behind, and he ended up living in the household of the Hyatts. He ended up living with them. There was also Mara's husband, and there was also the baby. So I regard that as 15 people living in that household, really, as her being the survivor of 15. But the very first person they came to take out of that home was the one who was disabled. And that's what she realized on that day in Israel, which is, yes, I will work with this organization, because she remembered the older cousin who was the very first one that the Nazis took away to kill. Right?
And she
Let me just also say, the celebrity spokesperson for Akeem in the United States was the great Eli Tahari. So we know him too. Yes. They almost had this kind of like little love affair.
So she would do these galas in Israel, and the people like Rabin would come, that level would come to support these fundraisers in Israel. And this was just a picture. My father is dancing actually with Karina, her daughter, and the other one is our brother, Al. And that smile on her face, when she finally came to her own, we got that smile again. It took a long time. You got that smile. And you are gonna read.
I think you've already gotten a sense of her zest and her love, absolute love of life. I was doing something in southern Maine at the University of Southern Maine, and I was giving some kind of talk. Shain was visiting at the time. I called her up on the stage so that we could have some fun. The entire audience was like, is it all right if we laugh? Because it was about the Holocaust, right? And it was like, no, my mother laughed all the time. She told dirty jokes till she was 90. It's okay, you can laugh, you know? So this is My Mother Dances at Weddings. Out of the whirlwind, my mother's feet, out of the dust, my mother's dance. One burden, that's all it takes to get her to move, her hips to shake. She leads the ring around the floor, dance for herself and so many more. The bride, the groom, a bar mitzvah boy. She exhales her blessings, inhales their joy. There is no burying any part of grief, so she steals these moments, a happiness thief. She taught me life is precious. She showed me the world is open. She practiced human dignity and preached a classless regard. She walked with power, but rejected its meanness. Seen by all as a will of iron, some photos might show her gentler and more fragile soul. My mother dances at weddings, kicks up her cracked and ancient heels, forgets the aching in her joints, loses the tightness in her chest, and casts off the shortness of her breath. Where the road does fork, and we must choose, she follows the bridal train and not the graveside path.
I'm bringing back these pictures of the families, my mother's family, my father's family. I wrote a piece. I'm not the writer in the family, but I wrote a piece. Okay, thank you. I wrote a piece many, many years ago. I'll just read it. My mother told me her story. As a child, that's what it was to me, her story. What I understood was that being Jewish was being part of a peoplehood in which there was loss. Loss of home, loss of mother, father, sisters, brothers, loss of everything that kept you tethered to the earth. Judaism was bullet holes in the legs, heads and faces of the adults around me. Tattooed numbers on the arms of the people who came to our home to play cards meant that they had it the worst. My mother told me that whatever she had experienced was still not as bad as what happened to the people who had those tattoos. My mother was a survivor. She was strong. She walked like a soldier. I knew being a Jew was something to be proud of. And in America, I was safe to present myself as a Jew and dare anyone to try and hurt me. But along with the bravado of childhood was a deep-seated terror that I could never admit to. But of course, the terror had to come out somehow, and it did, as anger, as rage. The only deep emotion that was accessible to me. Then I had my own children. The rage frightened them. And I had to come to terms with how I was going to save my children from the terror and anger that lived inside me, but wasn't really mine. Learning to give up the terror and rage left me with a vacant place in my connection to Judaism. My public school was closed on Jewish holidays, but I didn't really understand what the holidays were about since I wasn't given a Jewish education. I had to dress for the holidays, but wasn't expected to actually enter the shul. If I was to distance myself from my deep emotional connection to death and loss, what was going to link me to being Jewish? It wasn't until my son had to write the speech for his bar mitzvah, and we discussed his Torah portion, that I came to see that this learning could be fascinating. Slowly, over many years, I have in a scattered and random fashion been trying to educate myself about what lies beneath and beyond the association with loss, survival, and rage. This journey is leading me toward a connection in which I hope to get to know Judaism as a religion, as a culture, as a history,
is my own personal story.
And we spoke quickly about the Jewish Partisans Educational Foundation. If you go to their website, jewishpartisanseducationalfoundation.org, there is so much information about partisan fighters, and my mother is our mother, remember? Our mother is highlighted on that as she became the poster
Well, she was one
child.
of the founders.
So, I'm just gonna read a poem she wrote related to that part of it.
Just want to say something about this poster. I found out from JPAF, Jewish Partisans Educational Foundation, that it hangs in thousands of classrooms on 4 continents. I have gone to conferences where teachers, professors have walked up to me, seen my little name tag, and said, "Oh, Robel, are you by any chance related to Etta Robel?" And I said, "Yeah, she's my mother." "Really? Her poster was in my office." You know, it was in my classroom. So that would happen a lot, right? So this is called equipment. Equipment was a word my mother used often to talk about what people were equipped to do. It was not judgmental, because she knew that there were things that she was not equipped for. So it was a question of what were people equipped for. So this is called equipment. What in her life equipped her to dig a bullet from her leg to lie still under bodies until decay and stone seeped into blood and breath? What in her life equipped her for smuggling the few guns a farmer may be bought for, hoping SS or Home Guard hadn't gotten to him first? What in her life equipped her for executing traitors, for burning down squealers and Jew murderers? What in her life equipped her to see a pregnant sister butchered, ghetto burning, brothers shot running, father gone to forgotten grave in a hole somewhere in the surrounding woods? What in her life equipped her to walk alone through this life, always dancing for the dozen, seeing traces of eyes and hands in the children she dared to deliver from the fires and the pits?
Anna and I are going to alternate on this poem.
Can I just say, I've taught Holocaust studies for a long, long time, and originally in a high school setting. Whenever I would show the kids this picture, the girls would get like really, it's okay. They would like, you know, they would get really sort of like, I said, "It's okay, I know he's gorgeous." And the boys were jealous. What's that? Yes, he did. All the way
Till the end.
till the end.
At
Yes, they have
96.
full head of hair. Right.
Most Jewish people don't
This is a little more serious than what I've been saying, but it's called From Nothing. We're going to read this alternately. From nothing. What must it be like to sit in your mind, stand in your memory, oceans of glass long broken, ever unswept, still piercing? I swam towards you, then away in turns as a moon waxes and wanes, ever repeating wanting and not wanting.
I've inherited your memory anesthetized. It only hurts when I cry. Once in a while, it's possible for me to be in my life without being in yours. But who am I kidding?
Your lives matter more than mine. They have to, for my sake, for theirs. All the children ascended from you.
You are Eve. You are Adam. We are nothing without you. This is not a figure of speech. We are nothing without you, period. End of quote, exclamation point.
You are the originals, the very root of life. From ash you came, from smoke you were saved. From oceans of blood you rose, anthropods on the shoreline. You who walked out of the great nothing.
And so, I will sit in your mind, stand in your memory, swim in your seas of broken glass, every other step still piercing.
coming out of the war as partisans, I found a recording. There was a song known as the Partisan Song, which every time she got together, we were with a group of people who had been partisans, and there were gatherings. They would always end with this song. This is a version sung by Theodore Mikkel. And on the left is the transliteration in Yiddish. The grayed out part is he doesn't sing that verse. And on the right is the English translation. And I strongly suggest you read the translation.
Never say that you've walked the final way. No leaden skies obscure the light of day. The hour we long for will certainly appear, and our steps will proclaim we are still here. So niet kemel als du gehst den letzten Weg. Gott schieb ne kleine, verstellt neue Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgedeckte Schau. Es wird abbeugt von unser Knopf in seinem Dorf. Kommen wird noch unser ausgedeckte Schau. Es wird abbeugt von unser Knopf in seinem Dorf. Von ihnen Palmen ab bis weißen Land versteht. Wir kommen on mit unserem Heim, mit unserer Welt. Und jeder spitzt vor sich Gefahr unser Blut. Sprossen wird dort unser Chore, unser Mut. Und jeder spitzt vor sich Gefahr unser Blut. Sprossen wird dort unser Chore, unser Mut. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Leid. Es ist nicht kein Lied von Erfolgen weiter frei. Das hat Erfolg zwischen farbigen Gewänden. Das Lied gesungen mit Nagales in die Hände. Das hat Erfolg zwischen farbigen Gewänden. Das Lied gesungen mit Nagales in die Hände. Das Wort mit Kemo hast du gehst den letzten Weg. Von Stunden kleine, verstellt neue Tag. Kommen wird doch unser ausgedeckte Show. Es wird abbeugt von unser Trott in seinen Not. Kommen wird doch unser ausgedeckte Show. Es wird abbeugt von unser Trott in seinen Not.
Amen.
And we're going to put you through one more song.
This is a poem I wrote in 2009, about a year and a half after she died. This is called Because of Her, the Eder Hyatt Robel World War II partisan. Because of her, there were weddings, births, bar mitzvahs, then more marriages, more births, more bar mitzvahs, and then again and again unto a fourth generation. Multiplied by babies, how many lives were saved from gas and smoke, bullets and ash? From the 100 and more, arithmetic tells me well into 1,000 or so. Yes, when millions of lights are doused so swift, so fast, or so becomes a number, an exact figure. I would count them if I could, but they are scattered over continents. And even she did not know, could not recall the names of all. But many remembered, and through the years mystery letters arrived, invitations to brisses, bar mitzvahs, weddings. She'd go to solve the riddle, find herself singled out amidst strangers, the guest of honor. Music would stop, lights would dim, except one on her, except for the one on her. There'd be the toast before all others. If not for her, because of her, this day has come, this simcha, this day of joyous life. Because of her, Hinenu, we are here. And so it would go that on that day, she'd learn the name of yet another one she had saved.
Absolutely phenomenal.